Madison, Wisconsin is as good as it gets if you are like me and you love the college sports.
This is the Jump Around with Jim Rutledge and Pablo Iglesias, streaming live on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel.
Dancing down the sidelines. Can they catch him now? The Badgers answer instantly.
There will be no undefeated champion on Wisconsin with an unbelievable stretch drive to the championship game.
Gordon again. Inside the 5, touchdown! What a performance by Melvin Gordon.
Chucky Hepburn, Big Ten on the line. Yes!
Legacy cemented. The 2021 Badgers will go down in history as the first ever at Wisconsin to win a national championship.
That is the best college sports town in America.
And welcome into the Jump Around, a Badger-dedicated show here on ESPN Madison's YouTube stream. You also can stream us on the ESPN Wisconsin apps if you want to listen back. That's where to do it. Jim Rutledge alongside Pablo Iglesias. We have a fun show for you today. What up? Later in the show, we're going to be joined by Evan Flood from On3 and Rivals. We talked about high school recruiting. We talked about changes within the Badgers defensive line. And we also talked about just what we can expect out of the Badgers football team this year. We are going to spend today's show reacting to Luke Fickell clips from Big Ten Media Days, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But I first want to also give a shout out to Riley Yauk for having all this ready for us today. But Mimi Collier and Charlie Furbringer from Badger Volleyball have both been added to the AVCA Volleyball Player of the Year watch list. So congratulations to both of those women, and we are very excited to be the home of Badger Volleyball here in Madison. We are the flagship of Badger Volleyball, and we are looking forward to a very exciting season.
Young team, but excited to see what's going to happen. You know, we've seen people kind of come in and out, transfers come in. This is going to be an interesting season for Badger Volleyball. Excited for it. Like we said, we're the flagship over here, and thrilled to follow along this season.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We get to football season now, and it is, whether it's the NFL, we were up in Green Bay yesterday. Badger football is getting ready to get going here too. And we want to react. Basically, our clips today are all reactions to Luke Fickell from yesterday. Let's hear Luke Fickell on what the standard is at the University of Wisconsin.
Last year was not the standard, right? And it's pretty obvious to be able to say. And really, we're talking about the way that we finished last year. That's not the standard. That's not the expectation by any ways. I was not brought here thinking that that's in any way what it is that we expect at the University of Wisconsin. But I'm not here to dwell upon last year either. But what last year does do is it gives us an opportunity to be able to self-reflect. It gives us an opportunity to recognize things that we need to continue to be able to change. And I think that's what was most important as we attacked December and January for us in our program.
And I hate to say this, but I hope that Luke Fickell is correct, but I do have to correct him on one thing. Unfortunately, last year kind of was the standard for Badger football. They went from 9 wins in 2021 to 7-6, 7-6, 5-7. Now, obviously,
so you're saying like a descending type of
I mean, like,
what do you mean when you say last year was the standard?
If they had won one more game, they're basically still at their point. So yeah, they were one game worse than their standard, but their standard right now is a middling football team that wins 5 to 7 games. And this next year, record-wise, is not going to change it. Now I get what he's saying, because last year was even worse than the was a 7-6 season that I covered when I first got here under Brett Bielema, 2008. That team had a lot of internal turmoil. Players kicked off the team before the season even started, and so that team was not a good football team to watch, but it was still better than last year's team. But that team made a bowl game. They were a fingertip away from maybe not making a bowl game because they had to have a blocked extra point against Cal Poly to secure that. So that team was not happy, and they came back and fixed things and moved forward. And so I do hope it's a blip on the radar, but I think we also have to be honest that Luke Fickell doesn't want it to be the standard. Badger fans don't want it to be the standard. But I also think if you are truly holding yourself accountable as Badger football, so that includes the year before Luke Fickell got here, last year wasn't that far off the standard.
I just look at, and really I just more think about the horrendous feeling that I had after the Iowa loss when did we really have high expectations? We had no idea what to expect going into the Iowa game because it felt like that the offense was not really finding its groove. It felt like that there was things, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Iowa game was what did Phil Longo in, and that just hurts. That was a game that was just brutal. Where you come off a week 2 where you're just within like a couple scores of Penn State, it hurts, and then all of a sudden you just get blown out. Absolutely, you essentially get owned by one guy on Iowa. I think it was Caleb Johnson, their running back, who just steamrolled over Wisconsin's defense. And again, it was a lack of identity just in general, but especially that Wisconsin went winless in trophy games. I know we've joked a little bit about trophy games and the Big Ten and everything, but legitimately, you can't even come out with one trophy victory at all last season. I do 100% believe that that's not the standard. I think there was some disappointment, and I'm glad that we're leaving. It's address the elephant in the room. It's address the elephant in the room, and that's where I'm at too. Where again, they just lost what the standard is. They didn't uphold the standard, and to go 0-for-3, especially Minnesota, which a loss to, it felt like that game was decided well before halftime at that point. It didn't really feel like that Wisconsin could put up a fight in my eyes. Just being on the sideline from there, you kind of felt like that they wanted to try, but it was like, what could they do? Like, it was just kind of roll over and just wait for the game clock to hit 0 by the time the fourth quarter goes. That's how painful it was being at that game at Minnesota or versus Minnesota.
Yeah, if that's the standard for Badgers football, there are some very, very, very dark days ahead for this program. But I want to pick your guys' brains real quick on something I noticed. Luke Fickell, the way he pronounces Wisconsin. As Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people on Twitter actually getting incredibly irritated, and in YouTube comment, like all over social media, people were really irritated at that. And I think it goes into like he's not one of us, he's an outsider, that sort of perspective. So do you guys care how Luke Fickell pronounces Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, right? That's how he says it.
Let's make the main thing the main thing. And nobody cares however the hell he says Wisconsin.
Well, would you rather have Brian Kelly just flip around and have the southern accent all of a sudden? Like it's one of two things, I feel like.
Here's the other part of it. You know who was an outsider? Barry Alvarez. So can we acknowledge that the creation of the program was created by an outsider? The program had to change from Paul Chryst. Jim Leonard was not going to change the complexion of the program. The program had to change. Football has changed. It's not on just Luke Fickell for football changing. It's on McIntosh. It's on the entire Badger football infrastructure there that the Badgers have fallen behind into this. Luke Fickell, his cardinal and white sin so far was hiring Phil Longo. Mm-hmm. Not how he says Wisconsin. So let's make the main thing the main thing, and let's all remember that it was an outsider that's got a statue in front of Camp Randall.
This is real quick. It's just picking a battle. What's the point here? Like, what are we trying to get at? What type of fight is this?
And Luke Fickell here addressing something that I think Badger fans, if you really want to get mad, and you can't get mad at this, so you get mad at how he says Luke Fickell says Wisconsin. This isn't Brett Bielema's Wisconsin. This isn't Brett Bielema's Big Ten anymore. This is no longer that soft ass Big Ten that Brett Bielema was able to eat into. The Badgers under those days had to win like 2 games every year that were like they weren't favored in. This Big Ten is legit, and Luke Fickell talks about it.
Good afternoon, Coach. Mike Makita, Reddit CFB. You have an uncommonly challenging schedule this season. Is there anything you're doing differently to prepare for the variety of challenges you have on the schedule this season?
Well, thank you, Mike. Captain Obvious. You know what? Guess what you signed up for, right? And like I've said to our guys in the past, this isn't the Big Ten West anymore. And I can honestly say with that schedule has brought upon probably a lot of the changes that which we have, right? Whether that's guys that are no longer with us or guys that are with us today. The great thing about that schedule was pretty easy to be able to lay it down right in front of everybody, whether they were coming back for their 5th year or 4th year or guys that were coming into our program, a guy like Billy Edwards, right? This isn't the NFL where they lay out the schedule sometime in April. Everybody knows what they signed up for, and everybody knows what they stuck around for. And the beautiful thing about that is we've been able to embrace that. We've been able to say, hey, this isn't going to be an elephant in the room. We understand what being a part of the Big Ten, what being a part of this conference. And in order to be at the top and to be the best, you got to compete and you got to beat the best. And so it gives us a challenge, but an unbelievable opportunity in front of us as well.
Yeah, we were looking at Pro Football Focus too, ranking Wisconsin, having that as the toughest schedule in FBS. I mean, I do agree. Yeah, it's not the Big Ten West anymore. I love, and let me ask you guys how you feel about it too, because I'm a guy that's all about delivery. I'm all about how you say it too. You got to say it with your chest, and I want to be more about that here too. But it's Luke Fickell. I felt like that there was a lot more vindication, maybe if that's the right word. There was a lot more like he was owning that. He was saying that guys know exactly what it is. You know what the schedule is. Heck, we even know what some of the non-conference games are already looking like. If you could go up, you could see what the schedule looks like for the next few years for the Wisconsin Badgers. So it's not like you're getting the luck of the draw and figuring out like year after year who you might be playing. You know what's coming up. You know that this is a tough schedule. So I agree with that too, where it's like, you can't have the cake and eat it too if you're an old school Badger fan, knowing that, well, we ran through the Big Ten West and we'll make it to the Big Ten championship game. This ain't not even your grandfather's. This ain't your father's. This ain't your brother's Big Ten anymore. This ain't the Big Ten West. This is a whole new thing. Like, we're looking at the power rankings too. You got Oregon right there. You got Oregon ranked second according to Pro Football Focus. So I love the fact that he addressed this right then and there. He was able to say it confidently. That this isn't the Big Ten West, but it goes back to what we've said, week after week too. Is like it subtly reminds you of that 2016 team. It reminds you of a team that everybody already counted off. Everybody already wrote off. Rather that we'll see what happens. But I feel like, in my side of this too, is that if we look at how close they were in the USC game, the Penn State game, and the Oregon game last season. I feel like that there's got to be a shot at some point that the Badgers can pull out at least one marquee win. I can't see the Badgers losing every single of those big games. As tough as the Big Ten is and as tough as those opponents are in this schedule, I think the Badgers for sure can pull out the marquee win. I'm calling a Michigan upset on the road. I think the Badgers could wholeheartedly do that if they get the right chips in place.
I'm not getting into the schedule prediction game here. I would like to point.
Come on now.
I would like to point this out. So the 2011 Badgers with Russell Wilson played terrible UNLV team. Oregon State was terrible. Northern Illinois terrible. South Dakota terrible. That's how they get the things rolling. Nebraska was number 8 when they faced Nebraska. They won that one. Great. Trash Indiana team. Then they lost to Michigan State, a ranked football team.
On the Hail Mary.
Then they lost to Ohio State, so another good football team couldn't beat. Beat the snot out of a terrible Purdue team. Beat the snot out of a terrible Minnesota team. Beat the snot out of a terrible Illinois team. They did beat a ranked Penn State team. That was great. And then they beat Michigan State, and then they lost to Oregon. So they basically went 500 against ranked opponents. That record, that team, just extrapolating what they did against ranked opponents, they're finishing 500 this year. So, I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but let's be real when we look back at some of these other teams. That team was loaded. That team obviously could have just been coached better. That's my whole thing with Brett, is that he did a great job recruiting. If he was a better coach, the Badgers would have won more games. They would have won a damn Rose Bowl.
See,
so my thing is, we need to be fully clear, and I don't need Luke Fickell trying to point it out to everyone or giving a pass to everything, but we got to be eyes wide open. If this team wins 6 or 7 games this year, which is what they should have won last year, that's the equivalent of winning 9 or 10 in the old Big Ten West.
Yeah, would you rather have just this padded stat where it's like you're just winning all these games, or would you rather just try to tough out as many games as you can, because this schedule is a gauntlet? There's no question. There's nothing we can't move around it. We know how tough of a schedule this is, but it's like looking at it from the other way, from the Big Ten West schedule. Would you rather just run through and just get win after win and then get exposed come postseason? I don't know what the postseason outlook looks like for this team, but would you rather just, again, tough it out and see who you really are, see what this stretch can give you, or would you rather just take the easy way out and then see what happens when the postseason rolls around?
I think that's the real question there, because I love the new Big Ten schedule. You get 9 conference games. You're almost guaranteed 1 or 2 marquee games a season, which I think, as a fan, is awesome because it gives the Badgers opportunities to have these big moments. A big moment that we've been sorely lacking really since, 2017?
Yep.
The Orange Bowl win against Miami. When was the last big Badgers moment you can think of? So I want to ask you guys the question, I guess, would you rather have the soft Big Ten West schedule or a gauntlet like this where you're staring at 6-7 wins?
I'd rather have this schedule because this team, if they can, it's bad timing right now. This team is in the middle of trying to rebuild a program with a disaster of a schedule. With NIL and with some money, and the Badgers don't have the money that the Blue Bloods have, but they do have a lot of money that they can get themselves back to being competent and then maybe chase some players and give them opportunity for the spotlight at Wisconsin. So with this roster, I'd love to see the Big Ten West. That make me feel like, go ask Indiana how that goes. But, and again, that was one of Luke Fickell's flaws. They didn't take advantage of their first season. That was a soft, if he had a normal offense and didn't hire Phil Longo, maybe that year one, they win 9 games, and then last year feels like a blip, and everyone's excited again. So that didn't happen, but I'd still rather have this schedule.
Give me the tough schedule. See how you're battle tested. See how you go through it, because it's like it's not. We even learned from Oregon last year. They were a 1-loss team, and they ended up not even making it to the championship. So I think that's the thing. It's like not saying that Oregon didn't deserve to make it to a championship game and make a championship run, but just because you have the tough or the best record out of everybody, that doesn't mean that you're invincible either. You know, record only says so much. It is about two. Like, and I've said too, I want to know how they are in the first 2 weeks. I want them to play bully ball. I want them to be aggressive. I want to see them run up the score. Let's do that. Let's run up the score. See how the bully ball really is, because there's. You can't be passive at all this season. You got to almost like play that bully ball. And I know that you're not playing Big Ten teams the first 2 weeks because you got Alabama coming up week 3. We all know what it's going to be like out at Tuscaloosa. But if you are playing solid bully ball, honestly, in the first 2 weeks for me, that's how I'm going to define it. I think that puts you in a prime position. And going back to the question, though, I don't want a fluff schedule. I want a tough one. No fluff, only tough.
A little bit of news here before we get to the Luke Fickell clip. 49ers have signed Quintez Cephas, former Badger. A 1-year deal.
All right.
So Quintez getting another opportunity in the NFL after his, it was a gambling thing, right? Fantasy football or gambling sort of thing got him in trouble there. All right, let's get to Luke Fickell talking about new Badger quarterback Billy Edwards.
First and foremost is a guy that has walked in knowing that look, the whole idea was we were going to hand you the keys to this new offense, but everything that we do is earned. And so there's a uniqueness to that you have to be able to handle. And he's walked in, humbled himself in a lot of ways, earned and gained the respect of not just the locker room, but everybody within the coaching staff. And in order to do that, it takes somebody that's well in tune to all the things around him. And so it started there. His voice has continued to grow from the time he came in January to where he is now. And I think he's done it in an unbelievable way.
And I hope all that's true. I have not seen enough of Billy Edwards to know what's going to happen, but I do know that even last year in the abbreviated season, I believe he outpaced the Badgers in basically every important passing statistic. So
with a horrendous offensive line and no receivers,
and he didn't finish the season. Competence is something that I think we overrate sometimes. If he is competent and the Badgers' offense looks competent, we're going to have a more enjoyable season. I'm not trying to set the bar high. If the Badgers look capable and above average, now we might be talking about 8 wins. I'm looking for competent, which still has me at 6 wins, and I think Billy Edwards Jr. can get us and get the Badgers to 6 wins.
I think what I really admire the most about Billy Edwards Jr. coming in is how he's really owned, like, being a part of Wisconsin. Not saying that Tanner Mordecai and Tyler Van Dyke and Braden Locke never did that, but there's just something about the confidence that Billy Edwards brings in that he's already getting guys like beyond belief rallying around them, and he's even just being himself too. Like outside of the football side, I know that they were teasing a little bit of their media day video team shoots, and he was doing a bunch of Fortnite dances pretty much. He's just being himself. He's just being a guy, and we were out at Squat Fest as well. He was enjoying every single moment of it. Again, this isn't a knock on the past quarterbacks that that the transfers have had, or that Luke Fickell has had in the past, but I do really love that Billy Edwards, again, is just confidently being himself. He's owning every opportunity. He is saying the right things, but it seems like, at least too, from how the guys are backing him up, they're confident in that too. Because really, when it comes down to it, especially offensively and really just as a whole, like, you know, the quarterback is the guy. I know Luke Fickell actually even mentioned too yesterday at the media days is that they have like a leadership committee of 14 players total. which I think is also a strong thing to talk about too, is that they have more than just one guy to look to in terms of leadership. There's just been that back and forth in the transition of Luke Fickell and moving on from the past regime, and some guys that were still part of the Paul Chryst era and who they were recruited by. So there was that strange mesh, and now it feels like it's a little bit more of like Luke Fickell is getting more and more good control over that locker room and getting guys to buy in. And it seems like that Billy Edwards is just about that same thing, and it's cool to see that he's making that immediate impact right off the bat.
All right, continue with Luke Fickell from Big Ten Media Days, and there was a lot of adversity, over the last 2 seasons, and you can tell from when he got here to now, it's not that his confidence has gone away, but go listen to him at the end of last season. It was wavering. He's definitely bounced back, which anyone can do. You can have your down moments. He had a down moment. He was down at the end of last football season. I think he's been open about that. He does seem to have his swagger back again, but winning will really give it. But here's Fickell talking about adversity over the last 2 seasons.
Curious for you as a head coach. You're a guy who played in the trenches, former wrestler. Like, there's an element of, like, you got to be mentally resilient. You guys take a lot of flack. I mean, no joke about it. The schedule, as Ashley referenced and you reference, is a challenge. What's it been like for you to be in it and dig in and unearth these parts of your program that you want to turn?
It's a challenge. It really is. And everybody always asks, how do you relax? And it's really difficult to relax. And, there's nothing that anybody outside can say, right? People have asked, well, there's some pressure on you, or there's some different things. Like, there's no more pressure than what you put upon yourself and the expectations you have, and you know what you signed up for, right? I mean, the responsibility, like I said up there earlier, the responsibility that I know I have of leading this program and this team and what the expectations have liked and whether it goes back to Coach Alvarez and what has been built over the years, I understand that. That's motivating to me on a daily basis. I don't like where we've been, but I do like where we're headed.
Luke Fickell has the pelts on the wall to be able to talk like this. He is someone that you should feel comfortable that can turn this program around. And if you're a Badger fan, you should be rooting for Luke Fickell to turn this thing around, because if it's not him, there's going to be a step backward again. Because you're going to have someone come in here with different football sensibilities, with players leaving in the portal, like, bleeding out of the program. New players will come in, whatever. But if you want this program to take a step forward, you better be rooting hard that Luke Fickell is the one that takes this program forward after taking a step back. And I think he's capable. It's really a matter of, can he do it here? Because I actually have no doubt of Luke Fickell, if he ends up leaving Wisconsin, he will be successful at his next job. I'm just hoping that he can turn it around here and that he finds a way out of the hole he kind of dug. And so I'm not positive it's going to happen, but if you're a Badger fan, you're rooting for Luke Fickell to turn it around.
I'm rooting for him too. I feel like that we've noticed in spring ball with the availability that he has is that he's spoken a lot more confidently. He's spoken with, like I said earlier, with just the vindication too, and sometimes where it's like, all right, we're not going to be pushed around. We know, again, like, we know what the schedule looks like. We know that we haven't met up to the standards, but we're not just going to sit here and just hope that by doing the same thing that it's just going to totally change. We don't really know at the end of the day too, even behind the curtains, what those days are truly like and the work that they're putting in. But what really stands out to me is that it does feel like that the players in the locker room, they're enjoying themselves. They're having fun. They're almost letting loose a lot more. And it's not to say that the last 2 teams really like just have been sticks in the mud, but it doesn't even feel like that there's just this awkward, like, still energy of like, okay, what's going to happen? Or I don't know if the guys really feel like that. It's just flat in the locker room. Guys are going in there. They're having fun. They're enjoying themselves. Looking at some of the stuff with Jake Renfro and what they're doing with some of the podcasters out at Big Ten Media Days. They're letting loose and they're having fun. And I think I remember when I asked Luke Fickell about his time working with Sauce Gardner and saying, like, leadership is so different. Case by case, player by player, and he says, in order to be a good leader, it's not just you have to have this specific characteristic. He used Sauce Gardner as a great example, saying, like, he's a guy who has fun, and that's how he plays at his highest level. And I think Luke Fickell understands in so many different ways that success is very, it's not just one way to achieve success. You can be this type of person. You could be the happy-go-lucky guy. You could give that type of energy. You could be somebody who's more the in-your-face drill sergeant. I love the fact that he embraces multiple ways of how to be a leader, all the way up to himself.
Yeah, Pablo, you mentioned that Luke Fickell, you thought he sounded more confident this season. And I would agree with you. I think he sounds a lot more composed, a lot more confident, and he even mentioned it in another clip, I forget, sometime when he was on the Big Ten media panel, just talking about how he can sleep better at night. And that's how I feel, and I think that's how a lot of fans feel. But I've also talked to quite a few that think all of this stuff, it's still just bluster. Like, it sounds contrived. It sounds like he's striving to try and get sound bites or just to come off as confident. So, Jim, I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Do you think this is legit confidence, or do you think this is still the guy from the end of last season who's kind of grasping at straws?
I hate to split the baby one here, but it's both. I mean, he's not grasping his. He's not the guy at the end of last season.
Mm-hmm.
Is this confidence a little bit of bravado and fake it till you make it? Possibly. We all watched Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
I mean, some
Be
of
a
it
goldfish.
is be a goldfish, but also it's you got to change and bring a positive mentality. How else do you want him to be? And in sports, in life in general, we should all try to bring a positive mentality to each day and try to, fight through if things aren't going well. Woe is me isn't going to work. But as a football coach and leader of men, this is exactly what you need out of him. You need him to come. Now, do you as a fan have to buy it? And you can call it bluster. You can do whatever you want. Only thing that matters is, do the players buy in to what he's saying? I'm sure he wakes up every day with some sort of anxious feeling of like, I want, not even about his job, about I want to win. Like, these guys, they're paid. He wants to win at Wisconsin. He does not want his legacy to be the guy that crashed Wisconsin. Like, he wants to win. So does every morning when he wake up, does he have to give himself a pep talk and remind himself, hey, I'm bringing positive energy every day? Yeah, but I think that's a lot of people, especially if you're the leader of young men. You got to bring positive energy to the practice field every day, or what else are you going to do? And so I don't blame him for it. Because the one thing is for sure, this is closer to when he got here. He's always been a, rah-rah, positive energy guy. That's not Paul Christ.
Team
if
best
Paul Christ
guy.
was doing it, I'd be calling it BS.
Yeah.
Even if Jim Leonard was doing it, I'd be calling it BS. Brett Bielema was a bluster guy, so it would be less BS. He's not like the crazy positivity guy, but Barry had a persona. Brett had a persona. Jimmy and Paul were almost more curmudgeons, and then Fickell has a persona. This is who he is. Could he be faking it right now to convince himself everything's good? Yeah, but I hope he knows that things aren't good, but it doesn't mean he has to wallow in it. So I'm good with it.
Have you guys heard, too, what Jeff Grimes' offensive plan or mantra is more so? Both Billy Edwards and Jake Renfro were able to recite it word for word. Like, it sounds like that it's like something that's ingrained in them.
I couldn't recite it word for word, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, it was very impressive.
I have it right here in front of me. It's a violent attacking offense who imposes its will on opponents through dominant run game, vertical passing game, and distortion in order to disrupt, disorient, and dictate teams to the defense. The fact that
Hell yeah.
I couldn't even say that reading it just word for word, I had a little stumble there, but the fact that Billy Edwards and Jake Renfro could say that like it's, reading it off the back of their hand, or it's like that they memorized that. Maybe it's cheesy to some people, but for me, it just reminds me of I was a fraternity guy in college, and when we'd say the creed or something like that at the start of every chapter meeting, that's what it reminds me of. It reminds you of what your core values are. It reminds you of what you're really fighting for, or what you're really doing, and what you stand for. So you know what? If this is Wisconsin's way of getting the rah-rah in the locker room, maybe it feels a little cheesy, but it is what it is. These guys, at least based off of how they said it at Big Ten Media Days, you could tell that they own it. You could tell that they own it, and they want to steer into it and want to be about that mantra.
For reliable, violent offense.
See, that stresses me out a little bit. That's a long creed. Chris said that.
You think that's a long creed, man? I could recite the one that I think I still might even remember my fraternity one. That was a long one.
But smart, tough, dependable. That was one that the Badgers had under Chris. So 1-0 with Brett Bielema. So I get it, but sometimes creeds. Let's just be succinct. That was like a paragraph. But I get your point. But
yeah.
I'm worried about the play calls now. If that's what he needs to get his creed across, can you thin it down a little bit, Jeff? I know you're an offensive line coach / offensive coordinator now, but you don't have to be a wordsmith to just trim that a little bit. I get your overall point, though, Pablo. All right, let's get to the Twitter portal.
It's time for the Badgers Twitter portal.
All right. Well, we mentioned Billy Edwards and Jake Renfro reciting the creed of Jeff Grimes. They also were asked.
The Creed.
Yeah. They were also asked if they could guarantee any win on the schedule, what would it be? Here is their response.
Really quick, and I'll let you guys go on this. I know it's one game at a time, but if I made you circle one game that you could guarantee a win of these teams, which one is it? Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Illinois, or Minnesota? Guarantee a win.
I think
Minnesota.
that was going to be my answer, too. Yeah, Minnesota.
Minnesota. 135th meeting with the Gophers. Paul Bunyan's axe still means as much as it ever did if that's the team that you were picking to beat.
Now, I'm not in the business of promoting any Minnesota Twitter accounts. However, one did come across this and stated that that's how you know the hate is real. Minnesota-Wisconsin is one of the greatest rivalries in major college football, period. Anyone who denies that just doesn't know. So for you guys, where do you rank Minnesota-Wisconsin in the grand scheme of college football rivalries?
And I'm glad they all answered that. It's not a pretty rivalry. It's not even like a rivalry that's sexy either. It's not like they're fighting for much of anything. Usually,
you just hate.
It's
and
just, but that's what it's just about the wanting to beat the other team's ass, and I'm fine with that. Like that to me is a great rivalry. Not every rivalry has to be about national championships and Big Ten championships. So the only thing that knocks it down is I don't know where it ranks, but it's definitely a top 10 in my opinion. The only thing that knocks it down is just the fact that it usually doesn't carry any stakes. But the rest of it, all top-tier rivalry material.
I love this because it reminds me right now what really fueled my fire. It was the first year that I covered the Axe game in Minnesota. The Badgers had a shot. If they won out, they would have been representing the Big Ten West in the Big Ten Championship. Sorry to bring up that heartbreak again, but I'll never forget when fans stormed the field and you saw the players holding the axe, and then I hear on the PA that they have a special announcement. There's just this pause, and then they play jump around on the field at Minnesota. That got under my skin as a guy who did not go to UW-Madison, who is not a Badger alumni, and I'm like, oh man, I need the Badgers to come back and get this axe. I need them to win this one. So I love that. I know I've mentioned a couple weeks ago that I put Iowa a little ahead of the Wisconsin-Minnesota rivalry.
Which is absurd.
I get it. I'll take it. Everybody can cast their tomatoes at me. But the more I think about it and the more I look back at that memory too, it just burns a fire. I just really want Wisconsin to know that they're guaranteeing Minnesota. Let's go for it. I love that.
Yeah, nothing hurts worse than losing to Minnesota or Wisconsin for the Golden Gophers. Now, moving on to the question that she asked them. We talked about this a little bit in our text chain this week. If you guys could guarantee one win for the Badgers this season, you also picking Minnesota? Who you going with?
Yeah, I'm going Minnesota. I think every time I've asked this question, I always pick Minnesota.
Yep.
What did I say? I'm going to go Indiana. I think
what?
I say Indiana. I'm going to take it at Indiana.
Why?
Because why not? Because I believe.
That's not even the hardest game.
Yeah. Nobody cares if they beat Indiana.
Okay, wait. So, all right. What did I miss? I missed
you could have picked Ohio State, Oregon, or a rivalry, Iowa, Minnesota, or Alabama.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't understand.
That'd be like picking Miami of Ohio. It's like one step above.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently I'm. All right, fine. I'll change it, and I'll go with the second pick then, at Michigan.
Okay.
I think this is going to be the one that puts them on the radar. I love the optimism, Riley, of going to Tuscaloosa. Maybe you will give them the good luck that you gave them at USC last year. I don't know how.
Well, I don't think I gave them that great of luck. They blew the game.
The first 3 quarters, they looked good.
That they did. I'm guaranteeing Alabama because then I get to see them beat Bama down in Tuscaloosa, and I think they're going to beat Minnesota and Iowa regardless of whether I guarantee the win, so not too worried. But last but not least, we're having Evan Flood on the show here in just a minute, and he tweeted that Jake Renfro said that Joe Thomas has been active in UW's weight room. He's in the weight room every morning, like 5 a.m., doing crazy workouts. Yeah. We talked last week about how impactful J.J. Watt showing up to practice, and now you have Joe Thomas. He still lives in the area, coming in every day. How excited does this get you for, again, where the Badgers are at right now?
I am thrilled about it. I love that they had J.J. Watt in. I love they had Joe Thomas in. The more Badgers, the better. The more they connect with former Badgers, the better. So I think this is a big step forward. It seems trivial, but I do think it matters on some subconscious level that you got a guy like Joe Thomas around. You can tell stories. and God's honest truth, I would hear Joe Thomas speak 10 times out of 10 over J.J. Watt. Because
he's a good speaker.
And J.J. comes across as more John Gruden. Than, there's a lot of – I just feel like there's not a lot of real there. Joe, I think, would give it to you real. And I think Joe, if I want to badger around Joe Thomas, Melvin Gordon, Scott Tolzien, and I'll go with I'm trying to think of someone. Chris Borland. Like, those are some guys that I like. They're going to give, real non-fluff, non-BS sort of, non-Cliff Notes versions on leadership and being a Badger. Those guys will give it to you real.
I'm going to go with the list on this one, too, of Joe Thomas is in there. I would also, Chris Orr. Chris Orr is just a former teammate of ours, too.
He's
it's
fun.
just, in the best way, bat out of hell energy. It just makes me want to run through a brick wall. And I'm gonna go Jonathan Taylor. I've had a few conversations with him since he came back to Madison. Hard worker, but just, he brings out, in the best way, of very, not saying that the other guys don't, but more of, the positive energy. It's he'll push you, but he'll also know, too, Chris Orr, I think, is probably kind of more drill sergeant. He'll push you when you're, when you're just not dogging it, but you're just having a rough time in the workout. He's gonna pick you up and do that. But Jonathan Taylor is a different type of positive energy, and he'll be he'll pat you on the shoulder. He'll be all right, we didn't do this, but let's get after this together, type of thing. Those are the three guys that I feel would be pretty fun to work out with if I was a Badger football player currently right now and getting to learn, pick their brains.
All right, perfect timing. That'll do it for this iteration of the Badgers Twitter Report.
All right, we got Evan Flood from On3 coming up next. But if you're looking for your best night's sleep, get it with a new Tempur-Pedic from Steinhafels. Experience Tempur-Pedic's advanced pressure-relieving power designed to help make aches and pains a thing of the past. Right now, Queen Hybrids start at just $52 a month with Steinhafels 60-month financing. Plus, get $300 in Steinhafels cash. Upgrade with an anti-snore adjustable base for your best sleep yet. Steinhafels is your mattress destination. Shop in-store or online today. Evan Flood up next.
It's Steinhafels Double Up and Save Big sale, and it's too big to miss. Start with 10% off store-wide, then double your savings with an extra 10% off when you buy 2 or more furniture pieces. Plus, get up to $300 in Steinhafels cash when you purchase select mattresses. Steinhafels is Wisconsin's furniture and mattress leader. Shop now in-store or at steinhafels.com.
We got the station in our ear. All right, Evan, you hear us?
Yep.
All right, we'll jump right into this here. All right.
Let's do it. All right, sounds good.
We good, Riley? All right. And we are thrilled to be joined by Evan Flood, Wisconsin insider at On3 Sports. He's getting ready for Badger practice. So, Evan, thanks for taking the time to jump on with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you having me.
So as we get to, and you're really insightful, you're at a lot of these practices, you got a lot of recruiting things, and I want to talk about some of that, but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, from the end of spring into fall now, what are some things you're going to be keeping an eye on in practice around the Badger football team that you wanted to see growth from, or the football team, the coaches talked about seeing growth from the end of spring into the fall as we get ready for the season?
I think it's just that youth maybe playing before they're necessarily ready. I know Luke Fickell talked about this yesterday, where he doesn't want to necessarily rely on true freshmen or even second-year players playing. He was pretty proud of the fact. I think he had 30-some guys, in their last year or last 2 years in this team. For the first time, he feels like he has an older team. But I think the best part about the program, or the thing that they've got going for it now the most, is the youth. I think Luke Fickell has done a pretty good job recruiting, and I know it's kind of a fool's errand to look ahead in this day and age of college sports, banking on guys to stay 3, 4, 5 years. But you watch these practices behind the scenes. These last 2 recruiting classes he's put together look pretty good. They look the part. There's a lot of eye-opening players right now. I think the best way for Wisconsin to survive this schedule is to bring along some of their young and up-and-comers. Mainly redshirt freshmen, a few sophomores, maybe even a couple true freshmen that can potentially turn the tide and elevate this roster that did lose a lot from last season, regardless of that 5-7 record.
Evan, it's great it's probably really relieving to know, too, that the young guys could step up. There's a lot of opportunity there, but also with Nazir Forkurian and the fact that Luke Fickell actually said that he did put together and filed an appeal this past week. What's the pulse right now? Where could you give us a little bit of an insight of where things are with that? Do you feel optimistic? Do you think that this could come through and he could be playing as a Badger this season?
It feels like a kind of a last-ditch effort, last cry for help at this point to me. And they already filed an appeal in January, and now the sense is, well, let's try and get Nazir in front of the NCAA to personally state his case. And, maybe there's a tug on the old heartstrings there. I don't know. I don't know that his case has necessarily changed from, when you appealed in January. And I don't even know where Wisconsin, his stance is. I mean, he's had his 4 years of eligibility. I know the Diego Pavia case at Vanderbilt, but he was at junior college. It's not an NCAA entity, even though Forkurian played 2 years at Division II. That is an NCAA entity. So I don't know what I know what the case is that he was essentially denied a chance to make money while at the Division II level, but the NCAA hasn't really leaned into making these guys employees yet. So there's kind of that back and forth. The other part of it, Luke Fickell said something along the lines of, we don't want to change college football, we want to change a kid's life. Well, I feel like if you reverse this decision and give Forkurian another year of eligibility here, that does change college football. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but that kind of sets a different precedent than what's been going on, even in the last couple of years with all these changes. I know they kind of appealed to the death of his father, which I believe happened this freshman year, and you obviously feel for him for that. But he did play 9 games that season, so I don't know a way that Wisconsin gets this done other than, like Fickell said, sitting Forkurian and the NCAA down in a room, and then maybe you can pull on the heartstrings there to get another window. But they're in a really tough spot without him in this fall.
I want to get back to the football side of things in a second here, but how has your job changed in the idea that, we talk about Xavier Lucas and then you got the NIL stuff, we were talking about Nazir there, but also in the recruiting side of things, there is just as much and maybe even more interest on the transfer portal, players coming in from other colleges as opposed to the high school kids coming in. I mean, you got on the college side of it, you got college coaches saying, I don't even bother with high school kids anymore. So from your perspective, as far as your job, but also your interaction with high school kids and college coaches and the portal kids, how has your job changed over the last couple of years with this NIL stuff?
Yeah, a couple things stick out. I think I've been wrong in recruiting more than I would like to in the past, just because, not that it was ever cut and dry, but
yeah.
I mean, you could maybe know where a kid wants to go, but it doesn't mean where he's going anymore. I mean, everybody's got a price at the end of the day, right? Or
yep.
Most people have a price. And so now you've got all these third parties with agents and collectives in the mix. And there's a lot of times you just don't know. You might know what a parent says or what a kid says off the record, and you could sort of take that to the bank. But, that's backfired on me more than ever. Yeah, the other part is, the high school recruiting. I think the biggest thing I want to do is trying to get casual fans back and appeal to them, and they're just not interested in recruiting as much as they used to be, just because the roster is changing so much year by year. You can get invested in these high school kids, but a lot of times they're gone in a year or two, and mostly everybody's a portal team, right? I think that's where the emphasis kind of has to be. You look at what I do from basketball recruiting. I mean, I used to be out at 7, 8, 9 tournaments a year. I didn't go out once. And then, this comes from programs like Wisconsin who basically tell me that there's no point to it. We don't want to recruit high school kids. They don't affect our bottom line in terms of wins and losses every year. We would much rather spend on portal experienced players, even if they're lesser players than what these guys are in high school. And a lot of teams look at Illinois this past year, who had a great recruiting class. They had a pair of first rounders on their roster, and what did they do with it? But by the time they got to bring those guys around and kind of get all the freshman bumps out of them, they leave you, and you got to renegotiate with them every year. I think the biggest change is just you got to lean into the portal and try and make that a year-long business, and it is, even when it's not open. Let's be serious. All these schools are either talking or evaluating kids on current rosters right now, even when they're in season, even before the season has started. they're getting involved in that. So I would say those are the biggest changes. But it's not what it used to be, where it was heavy on high school recruiting and that was the lifeblood of the program. That's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, pivoting a little bit back to football, like we were talking about, you mentioned the transfers and everything. That's the big thing. That's the bread and butter. That's what's going to help teams move forward from Wisconsin football and the transfers. I know Jaden Ballard's a big name, but just in general too, for you, any big players transfer wise, who are going to be some of the big names that Wisconsin football fans should really be excited about, looking forward to?
Well, obviously everybody knows about Billy Edwards, right? Quarterback. He's going to make or break the season for the most part. But the guy I think might be the best player is Charles Perkins, the defensive lineman. Came over from UT Martin, and you look at what went wrong for Wisconsin last season. I mean, you could point to a lot of things, but they just weren't tough. They weren't physical. They weren't big enough in the trenches, particularly in those 3 rivalry game losses to Illinois, Nebraska. Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. I believe those 3 teams combined for 629 yards, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry against Wisconsin. This is a guy that can be a difference maker in that regard. In spring ball, you just feel him on the defensive front. He's a mean, nasty, physical kid. Pair with JVR Suggs, kind of does a lot of the same things up front. But Perkins was the guy I was probably most high about. Guy that I think out of necessity we didn't see in spring because he's a mid-year enrollee. Was Lance Mason, the tight end out of Missouri State, a 13 All-FCS guy. Wisconsin had something like 22 receptions from its tight ends last season. He had 39 for almost 600 yards and 6 scores. He almost doubled the production Wisconsin got by himself. So he's going to be a guy that's going to have to play out of necessity. Then Davis Heinzen, too, out of Central Michigan, the left tackle. Another guy that has to play and has to be really good. Kevin Haywood goes down in spring. He was their projected starting left tackle. I know Luke Fickell said at Big Ten Media Days they have options there. Maybe you slide Joe Brunner out to left tackle, but you're not bringing this kid in the middle of the year unless you expect him to start.
You tweeted this out about Jack Renfro saying that Joe Thomas has been active in the UW weight room. I love hearing that. Obviously, J.J. Watt was in town. To me, that's more impactful than having even a guy like John Gruden around. We talked with Monte Ball. He said that Jeff Grimes, new offensive coordinator, texted basically all of the substantial Badger running back alums. Something that didn't happen under Phil Longo, basically saying we're going to get back to Badger football. I know it's obviously an outside thing, but I do think it matters for whether it's from external support, but also players understanding the standard. And I know Luke Fickell said last year was not the standard for Badger football, but allowing Luke Fickell to say, you know what, I don't have to, I should open my arms up to some famous alums and try to get that lifeblood back in here. I think it'll get fans more excited, but also kind of reestablish a culture at Wisconsin that I'm not saying Luke Fickell lost it, but having guys like Joe Thomas and J.J. Watt can only be a positive thing if they're around.
Yeah, and I think that was a problem early in his tenure. I think a lot of people noticed what was going on Twitter. There were former Badgers, prominent former Badgers, kind of taking shots at him, shots at the program. And, I've talked to a few here and there. I never know what to make out of it. But, there had been a lack of outreach with a lot of these guys that just kind of feel like, they're not a part of the program anymore. And that part of that is just going to happen when you bring in a whole new regime with no Wisconsin ties. But I think you saw it hurt a lot in in-state recruiting too. I mean, you talk to some of these kids that leave the state, they just don't feel like this is the same Wisconsin anymore. This was a program generally built, or I should say featured a lot of alumni on staff. There were a lot of former players, even in the recruiting department at times. They could sell this place better than anyone else can because they came through the program. I think it's huge that you're getting some of these big names, Joe Thomas, J.J. Watt, Monte Ball, whoever, on board. I know Melvin Gordon, I believe he and Luke Fickell connected out in Las Vegas at that charity golf thing, what Wisconsin does, and they helped, I think you believe, put in a message for Amari Latimer, the 4-star running back commit too. So anytime you can get these names involved, we know Wisconsin, I don't want to call it a culture problem necessarily because I think the guys in the locker room are bought in and believe in the right things. But, those are the guys that make this place special and take it to another level. Anytime they're involved, I think you can't really put a price on that type of thing.
Evan, the addition to the staff with Jeff Grimes changing it up, and Luke Fickell's been pretty straightforward, saying that you're going to get a little bit of the older Wisconsin type of vibe, but he's not trying to go full just ground and pound run. I think there was even the mantra that the offensive guys have, straightforward. I don't know if I know it to heart like these guys, but they are just very committed to having a very specific offensive attack. What's your take on Jeff Grimes and how he's really changed the attitude and getting these guys to buy in?
Initially I was kind of against the hire. I felt like Grimes was a guy who passed his prime. You saw him kind of flame out at BYU, flame out at Baylor. And, maybe he is, but I think one thing you can never underestimate is fit and what he wants to do. At least the way he's talking, at least what we've seen in spring ball, what he does fits with Wisconsin to a T. Now, they don't necessarily have the big, mauling, dominant offensive line yet. I think the running backs, while they could be special, I would guess they're a year away from really taking off. But you look at what happened last year with an offense that was so reliant on quarterback play. You went in and game out, trying to figure out what Wisconsin wanted to be. And, that first year, Braylon Allen solved some problems for him at times. You could just give him the ball. But, when that guy leaves your program and now you're very reliant on your quarterbacks and wide receivers, that was hard to win. So I think Grimes will do a good job of kind of taking that off the plate of Billy Edwards and making things simple. But I do like the flavor that he brings to this offense. He's got an abundance of wide receivers. It's not a stacked wide receiver room by any means, but he's got guys with different skill sets. One thing we saw in spring is a willingness to get these guys the ball in a variety of different ways, and that was without Trechke Kahana, who hasn't participated in the spring yet outside of one practice. And they were doing a lot of different things. I think more willingness to take deep shots down the field. They want to pound, get suck the defense in, and then go over the top. And you mentioned a guy like Ballard, that's where he kind of comes in. Good ability to get a step behind somebody and make a play with the ball in the air. We obviously all saw what Vinny Anthony could do last year. So it fits Wisconsin, but I wouldn't call it necessarily going back to what Paul Chryst necessarily did. I would say there's a little more flavor, a little more flair to it. The question you have with Grimes, though, is, are you just stopping the bleeding? Because the whole reason you moved on from Paul Chryst and went to Phil Longo in the first place was to try and get this program up to the modern era and play catch up here. Now it feels like, okay, I think you have to wonder, is this a short-term solution or is this a long-term solution? And Wisconsin can continue to win like this without necessarily having the explosive offense that you see the Blue Bloods having.
With I know you're tight on time here, so I want to get your kind of way too early prediction for the record for the Badgers. But I wanted to, again, back to not a culture issue, but almost a brand issue within fans and states and also high school coaches. Luke Fickell kind of addressed, because there's been some high school coaches who have been upset that the Badgers haven't recruited them like they used to in the past. I think it kind of touched on it, that high school recruiting for all college programs isn't what it used to be, especially the Power Five. But let's hear from Fickell, then I want to hear your reaction to it.
You talked about being a team that wants to go into the high schools, right, and be able to recruit. Where's the balance when you have to go out and get veteran guys from the party?
This year was unique, and after 2 years, we kind of recognized some things that we lacked and some things that we needed to do different. Getting some more size, as you will look us up front defensively, and particularly size-wise defensive line, that was just an area that you couldn't get through high school, right? I mean, just that development, that maturity in those positions in particular. So as we move forward, now that going into year 3 and then into year 4, you feel like you've got a base of young guys. We've been playing with 70% of our guys within the first or 2 years, 1 to 2 years of experience. Now we're finally a team where we've got 34 guys or 33 guys in the final year of their college athletic ability. I don't know what year that makes them, but the idea that they've exhausted or going to exhaust their eligibility in college, that makes us a more mature team, and I think that's what we really needed.
So, Evan, is that kind of what you feel being around the high school teams is a fair assessment there?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know if at least other press conferences Luke Fickell has done, I don't necessarily think that's been the message. Day one, he said he didn't want to be a portal team, right? I think that was his big thing, and he wanted to continue to do things the Wisconsin way, develop kids over a 4 to 5 year period. And I just wonder, if he's getting away from that or realizing it's just not attainable anymore. Maybe something like Xavier Lucas, you just say, what's the point, right? You pour your heart and soul into a kid for a year, recruit him, you get him out of Florida, away from Florida State, Miami, whoever, and you still lose him after 1 year before it ever really gets started. I wonder if that makes him a little more cynical towards high school recruiting. But he's right. I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think high school recruiting is the lifeblood of a program anymore. I think you live and die in the portal. Obviously, you would like to find a healthy balance. I think it's still important, especially if you're a Wisconsin who's not going to have the funds of a blue blood, that you got to find some diamonds in the rough. You got to keep these kids around. But at the same time, the minute the secret's out on, you're under the radar guys, they're getting offers from every which way to leave. So there's a balance that has to be struck. I don't know if I necessarily have the answer on how to strike that balance. I think it's a spot for a place like Wisconsin, who's probably got medium portal money, does a decent job in recruiting, can have a borderline top 25 class. But the biggest thing about the portal, what it allows you to do is keep guys, because guys have already left, right? They're not, most of them aren't looking to leave a second time. Obviously, I say that knowing what happened with Tanner Koziel and Mark Camper, who were here for a few weeks, a couple practices, and out the door. But in most cases, why the portal's effective is, they've already left another school. They've already been humbled and gone through the process in some way. They're not a typical arrogant 18-year-old that knows everything, and there's value in that in your locker room and in your team, and just from being able to retain players. And I think you saw that in the last cycle. It was less about necessarily trying to grab rental players who were only here for a year. You saw quite a few underdeveloped guys who weren't necessarily stars even at the FCS level in this last class that are going to be sticking around for 2 or 3 years. That maybe that's the way to kind of get around high school recruiting and losing kids that leave after they don't play year 1, year 2.
Evan, before we let you go, just one more thing with the schedule, and we all know how tough it's going to be for Wisconsin. But what's your legitimate record prediction? How are you feeling about this schedule and how it's going to challenge Wisconsin this season?
I go back and forth on this because I don't want to be like everybody else who just says 5-6 wins. I don't want to fall in that, but I don't know how to avoid it. I keep going back to, 2016, where they had just a gauntlet of a schedule. Nobody expected anything of them. Now this is 2 different eras, 2 different Big Tens. But there's always the chance that a team like Illinois isn't what we think it is. You get them at home. A team like Indiana isn't what we think they are. I'm going to say 6 wins and get back to the bowl eligibility. But man, I wouldn't argue 4. I wouldn't argue 5. I wouldn't argue against 7. I think there's so much up in the air with this team now that I think the offensive and defensive schemes both fit the identity of this program. And for the first time in 3 years, I can say I know what you're trying to be, know what you're trying to achieve on both sides of the ball. So I think there's a potential for Wisconsin to survive. And you look at even some of the tough games. At Michigan, you're presumably going up against a true freshman quarterback. You never know how that might play out. You'd only be 2 Big Ten games in. Alabama, I think, might get ugly. We're not going to predict them to win that one. Iowa at home. That's always one where. Now they have a quarterback, which is the interesting thing, or presumably they have a quarterback. That's always one where just don't shoot yourself in the foot and you win the game for the most part.
Yep.
But I think it's the last 4 games. If you can win 3, even 2, I think fans will be happy just based on the way they finished the last 2 seasons, especially last season under Fickell. But yeah, I would sit at 6 wins right now.
Yeah, and Evan, thanks for the time. I'm right there with the 6 wins. I just want them to look competent in their losses and their wins. Everything felt, and we're both Bears fans. Pablo and I are. Bears touchdowns always felt like an accident for so long. Last year, Badger touchdowns felt like an accident, and I would prefer it actually feels purposeful this year when they score touchdowns. So, thanks for taking. I know you got to get to practice. Thanks for hopping on with us, Evan Flood, Wisconsin Insider at On3. Good luck at On3. We look forward to continuing following your stuff.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, thanks, that was Evan Flood. This has been The Jump Around, a Badger-dedicated show on ESPN Madison. Thanks, Evan.